What guidance do employees need when cyber and physical security collide? That's the topic of our live panel discussion today. Good afternoon, everyone, and good evening to some, and welcome to the live Cybersecurity Awareness Forum, the best part of your security week. Brought to you by ClickArmor, the first interactive security awareness training, assessment, and engagement platform. Session 39, Wednesday, March 6th, 2024. And today we are talking about where cyber and physical security collide. I'm Ryan from ClickArmor, and I'm joined by an amazing panel who I'll introduce momentarily. But for those of you who have not attended before, just a few housekeeping details before we start. First off, we'd like the attendees to type into the chat where they're joining us from around the world. We'll go through a bit of a roll call in a few minutes and see where everyone's at. It's great to see the international participation. And while you're doing that, I just wanted to remind everyone that this session is brought to you by ClickArmor. Also, as the session unfolds, please use the chat for any questions you have for the panel or resources you'd like to share, and feel free to network. One note as well, CPE credits are offered for today's hour. If you're in need, please reach out to me via LinkedIn, and I'll get you that over to your inbox ASAP. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to today's panel. First off, we've got our first-time panelist here. We've got Tracy. She works at the Yorkville University and the Toronto Film School in the position of Director of Safety and Security, managing their national safety and security programs. Tracy also volunteers with Humber College, acting as a mentor and member of the Program Advisory Committee for the Protection, Security, and Investigations Program. Welcome to your first panel, Tracy. It is great to have you.
Thanks so much.
Next up, we've got Fleetus. He's a seasoned IT and security professional, currently a security operations manager. Beyond his expertise, he finds immense joy in sharing his passion for cybersecurity with others. Welcome back, Fleetus. Always great to see you. And then we've got Sid. Sid's currently the head of IT at Greenpeace Canada. He has worked in the nonprofit and corporate sectors and has run his own IT services business for over 15 years. And thank you very much for returning to the panel, Sid. Great to see you as always, my friend.
Thank you.
And finally, we've got Scott, the CEO and founder of ClickArmor. Thank you, Scott, for your time today. And without any further ado, I'd like to kick things off.
Let's go.
Awesome. So first off, a little housekeeping about what do we do with these recordings? Well, we post the full session on YouTube within 3 days. Then we extract each session's full transcript and create a blog post with key discussions. Then we distill content every quarter in an industry report. And finally, we allow you to comment on the session or topics within the CSAF website. So if you're interested in any or all of this, you can follow the QR links there. Most importantly, the one at the bottom there is our members-driven security awareness forums site where you can share best practices, tips, learning, just chat about what's going on in the security world, and find all of our past recordings and links and information for anything upcoming. So please check that out if you've got some time this afternoon. So, what is physical security? Well, physical security encompasses measures to protect against real-world events and actions that could cause damage or loss to property or people. Now, these events include fire, flood, natural disasters, burglary, theft, vandalism, and terrorism. You know, all the things that we have in our IR playbooks, but we likely have not actually, come across yet. But it's time to think about them, and it's time to revisit them as we all, start to return to the workplaces. We're back to our offices, and we should probably, addressing all of our attack vectors, not just, the cyber and the digital. And so that being said, what is the importance of physical security? Well, often overshadowed by cybersecurity, physical security is equally vital. It involves securing premises, facilities, and devices to prevent unauthorized access and mitigate risks. It's a small piece of the pie, but as you can see, 6%. This isn't the banking industry specific, but it'll tell a bigger story. But 6% of all attacks are still coming via a physical attack vector. So, are we paying attention? Do we have 6% of our resources allocated to physical, 6% of our budget, etc., or are we lacking and falling behind? So that brings us to today's topic of where cybersecurity and physical collide. Physical security and cybersecurity, they're interconnected. One can't exist without the other. I mean, they can, but not effectively. So physical security protects cybersecurity. Through access control, we see that limiting physical access to spaces. And then securing devices, equipment and networks, actual locks, RFID key cards, all these different kind of technologies that are developed to be able to monitor and keep the flow of people through, buildings and situations, but in a secure fashion. And then cybersecurity on the flip side enhances physical security. system administration control of, system functions and their settings, monitoring systems, AI tools, and the alert and response system as well. So a very critical and crucial, cross section, and that's why we thought, today would be an opportune time to talk about it. And we're lucky to have some panelists with experience, in those areas as well. So then, how do we include physical security into your training? So integrating physical security training into your overall security awareness training program is crucial, for a well-rounded approach to safety and protection of all assets. So again, some of the ways that we think this can be accomplished would be through your role-based training, through customized content, hands-on practice simulations and interactive learning, and communication and reporting of current status. Make sure people are aware of, how things work, what the physical, security requirements are, and not only what happens, if they don't do it. What are the potential, breaches and threats that come by not following these simple guidelines. So that's going to bring us to our first poll question of the day. We'll have 3 polls just to kind of test, the temperature of the room and see where everyone's at. While the first poll is being launched, I'm just going to jump over to the chat and quickly see where everyone's coming from.
Yeah, we've got everybody around the world: Turkey, San Jose,
That's awesome.
North
Yeah,
Carolina, of course,
and we've got Alliston, Ontario. There we go.
Victoria,
I like
BC.
this.
Yeah,
Best known for the Honda plant, right? There we go. Now maybe we can start adding the markers. And why would we know your town? So,
yeah. What's important about your town? That's great.
exactly. Oh, Colin is in Waterloo. Good to see you again, Colin. It's always a pleasure to have you here. Lots of Ottawa representation, Vancouver, absolutely beautiful part of the country. Saskatoon, there we go. I think we hit them all. Turkey,
Yeah.
Ohio, North Carolina, Beaverton, Ottawa. There we go. It's an international occurrence as always. So thank you everyone for joining us as we take a look at the poll. And so as that's kind of wrapping up.
Yeah, we'll let that run for a few minutes. And,
yeah, we'll just leave that going in the background, and I'll bring the first talking point question to the panel. And for the panelists, we can always just put up your hand via Zoom if you want to jump into the queue to have your say, and we'll rotate through. And again, if you have any questions for the panelists or comments or what we're talking about, please just drop it in the chat. So first question today to the panel: what are the most common risks to information assets from physical threats or exposures? So any takers? Who wants to jump up there first? Well, I see Scott.
Go ahead, Tracy.
Let's let Tracy, the physical security
Great.
expert on the panel, lead the way.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, the most common risk to information security from physical threats is social engineering and complacency in personnel. So, allowing things like piggybacking, in Canada in particular, and I can't speak to other parts of the world where some of our folks are represented from today, but in Canada, we tend to be a very polite society. We're very good at holding doors open for each other. We might use visual cues like an authoritative figure carrying a clipboard with a high visibility vest and just automatically assume they should be in the area they're in. And I think I used an example with Scott and Ryan in the past where an individual came in for an interview, handed a USB stick to the receptionist and said very pleadingly, "I couldn't print a copy of my resume off. Would you mind putting this USB stick into your laptop and printing off my resume for me?"
I was waiting for Fleetus's response.
Always a treat when you don't have the right awareness in place, and you can be so vulnerable in those scenarios by just the poor, innocent and nice, polite act in complying with that request created a huge risk for an organization. So that's my piece.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tracy. Scott?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think as far as the most common things I've seen, it's usually unsecured mobile devices that are carried around and either accidentally lost or stolen. And these days, if you're just using an iPhone or an Android phone, I think they're typically encrypted, but they may have weak passwords on them. So that again sort of collides with the cyber issues that we need to keep people aware of. And on Apple devices, you can easily turn on File Vault and things like that. But I see a lot of Windows devices that aren't using, full disk encryption. So those are, I think, the things I see most often.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we see that happening more and more as people are working remotely and are working on the move, and devices are lighter, faster, easier, that you don't have to have a supercomputer to do your job. You just have a nice laptop. But again, that laptop gets used for personal life, business life, gets taken, to all the different events, gets moved around a lot. So your physical security, you may not think about it, but it's something to be mindful of all the time. Right? It's like that key card that your company gave you, that laptop they issued, the phone they issued. Those are all physical items that you need to be mindful of. So your physical security kind of follows you. And I think that's maybe the disconnect that some people overlook sometimes.
Yeah.
Um,
So to add,
from a Sid or Fleetus, Tim.
yeah, I'll chime in here. So it's even more broad than that. It's the fact that we just allow assets to be freely used, taken places. So you alluded to a lot of us use mobile devices. So a tablet, a laptop, or a phone. Yes, your laptop is called a mobile device because it moves with you. So you got to be careful where you're using it. Don't pull up your R&D blueprints or your financials in first class with someone sitting beside you and letting them shoulder surf. Use a screen protector. Don't use a speakerphone on your physical device and share information. That's social engineering. I'm going to tell you about the deal I'm making. Or don't let your interns, aka your kids, your spouse, use your corporate asset to do activities because they may not follow their, first off, you're breaking corporate policy. Second, they're probably not aware of the security features that you do and you're not have enabled. So you could be giving away PI, PHI, and it's tax season. Don't have a clean desk policy, even at work. Don't bring in your W-2s or your statements and just leave them on your desk, get up and walk away. So there's all that too. Social engineering is impeded or going to happen, but at the same time, what we can do from the cyber piece is we can track the badge access. Did you badge in today if you have a badge before you join the network? That way I can see if it's technically Ryan who's in the building today. Why am I seeing Ryan log in from the 5th floor, but there's no badge entry? He never went to the turnstile or he never
Yeah.
parked his car,
That's
etc.
awesome. And that's where we're taking the technology, and we're finding ways to use that technology to better our physical kind of protections of our assets and our people. Right. I mean, we have to look at this from a different point of view. Not always are the people going to cause the problem, right? I mean, Sid, this is maybe right up your alley where you guys probably have a different kind of approach to physical security than most organizations, because unfortunately you guys have been a target, of violence and espionage and all kinds of silly things, just because of the nature of your business. So do you guys have anything in your kind of your physical playbook that's maybe a little different that we haven't talked about?
One thing I'd like to bring up is bring your own device. That is something that, because we're working from home and we're moving away from having corporate owned phones, we, we, we don't want to be um, uh, locked into a long contract, and there are a lot of people who use their own laptops. We log into all services from one place, and that can be done on any machine. But this allows people to log in, at a person's home, on a on somebody's tablet, on their own machines, and that brings a whole new that opens up a whole new can of worms, because those are not secure in the same way. They are not part of our endpoint systems management. They don't have antivirus in the same way. Endpoint device uh, security. So I think that's something we really need to talk about. Regarding physical security on our ships, we have ships. The radio operators are specially trained. There's a whole protocol of how we uplink and downlink, but that's I think on the scope.
Yeah, but still, like a cool concept to just like think about that. Not only do we have to consider physical security as a broad thing, but then each sector has to kind of look at it from a different perspective of what are their attack vectors, what are their weaknesses, or and then appropriately do it. Like, yeah, maritime navigation and how to deal with that is definitely outside of my playbook, but it's something that you guys, if you don't have it in yours, it's a disaster waiting to happen. So I think valid points by everyone. Any final comments about about how these two kind of crossed before we move on to the
I
next
want to
poll
go back
question?
to Tracy's real quick. I think I saw it from one of our person is we have to be comfortable stopping and asking people, are they supposed to be there? It's hard sometimes as a human to say, show me your badge, tell me your name, tell me your business, why are you here? And be comfortable sometimes being awkward, like turn around and pulling the door shut behind you and forcing them to badge in.
Mhm.
Or picking up the phone and saying, hey, I need you to verify your identity by calling such and such person, and then I need to physically speak with them, not just you pretending you're having a phone call and freaking using phone hacking to get your way around, which we've talked on previous calls. We
Yeah.
have to get to that point. Well, we as humans have to take the human culture and having chivalry or being a gentleman, and in the workplace, kind of maybe let it go for a moment and challenge that individual who's carrying the clipboard, who's in the vest, who's carrying a ladder.
Yeah, and if that was a challenge 5 years ago, like, think about how much more of a challenge it is now as people just all of a sudden didn't work in an office. Think about the entire generation of people that literally graduated university, went into their first job as a remote job, and now, like, 3 years later, they're an experienced asset in the organization, and they're being asked to come into an office for the first time. They don't
Correct.
have any of these skills. They
No.
just went through they just went through all of their education, learning, and stuff like that with no physical security barriers, like, no kind of roadblocks or anything. And now they're just brought into a large corporate environment, and they're expected to not hold the door open on their first day back, right? They're expected to not let someone in the elevator. They're expected to not share the IT password or the Wi-Fi password with someone who says they're in the same situation. They're just trying to jump on. All these things that you could, social engineer your way in. I mean, we're all just kind of primed to A, avoid conflict, and B, when you show up to a job, you want to impress, you want to please. So it kind of goes against the opposite of what, Thea and Tracy and everyone else are kind of highlighting, that we're too damn kind. we, at some point we're going to have to say no. And you're like, I don't want to be the first one to say no. Scott?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment a little bit on, I think it was something you said in the chat by Prasanth, basically mentioning CIA, meaning confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And, when we talk about physical, we don't always necessarily make that distinction, but it can help people, I think, to understand more about why they have to be more vigilant and how. Because I think a lot of people have the sense that, well, I don't have anything that's particularly sensitive, in my area or at home or whatever. But if we can convince them to think more about confidentiality, for sure, our data is important, but also integrity of our systems, right? We don't want somebody coming in and launching malware on our systems, or, disrupting something that would cause a loss of availability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, corporate espionage and all these different things as well that could go a long way, right? Could cripple a company, for sure. Well, fantastic comments. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to jump into our next poll here. I'm just going to go ahead and share that quickly so we can all take a look at it as Scott launches it.
There we go. Perfect.
So our next poll question, have you experienced incidents where cyber and physical security incidents have intersected? Right. So, and again, I would love to hear about some of these in the chat. We can bring them up into the conversation as well. So if you have, witnessed anything, if you've been involved in something, yeah, please share that with us as we answer these questions. And as we leave that up, I think we kind of touched on some of this when we talked about what areas of physical security commonly intersect. I think we've touched on that, but is there any additional points where the panelists kind of see maybe the new area, or maybe ask it in a different way? What's the emerging threat area? So where do we see kind of the next issue coming from when it comes to kind of physical in the intersection with cyber? Anyone want to jump on that question first?
Tracy, you can go first, and I'll go after you.
Yeah, you sure?
Yes.
Tracy, the floor is yours.
Woohoo! So I was going to say thefts and break-ins. So those are, in my experience, one of the key penetration points where information security assets are lost, stolen, unaccounted for, even in some circumstances unreturned. So whether that theft is resultant from somebody actually penetrating your boundaries and your borders of your property and getting into your spaces, or if it's opportunistic in terms of they can just see your equipment and technology through your ground floor glass windows. Like I see this in so many places in my current organization. And we even provide fancy river rock right next to our ground floor windows so that you could more easily execute that break-in into our space where you have this 85-inch conference room TV and whatnot. So I think really giving employees an opportunity to understand where those vulnerabilities can trigger catastrophic security, cybersecurity incidents as a result, and can cripple your organization. You know, we're all employed because there's a backbone and a spine within our organization. And if we can't do our business, you're not going to have a job. So certainly I see the biggest opportunities as those thefts, and making sure employees know how to report a theft, how to raise their hand quickly, efficiently, and making sure that as a physical security professional, I'm conducting, to one of the points in the comments, regular and routine physical security audits to check my vulnerability, my risk factors, and ensure that my security teams in place have put us in a good position. Blinds are closed at the end of the night in classrooms, you know, where we can't necessarily move our properties. We're considering ways in which to harden ourselves against those penetration points. And then to your, you know, training for your individual and unique employees coming back to the workplace. If you lose your laptop, in your car even, and that's another one of my number one intersections with InfoSec. Your laptop is stowed under the seat in the front of your car, or even unsurprisingly on the seat itself in plain sight from outside the car, because you're only going in and out of Starbucks. So why would you need to keep it out of sight? And then making sure that cyber and information security are informed of that risk so that it can be shut down immediately. And I think it was Sid mentioned, or maybe Fleetus earlier, there's a lot of, you know, good software and encryption in most of our devices today that keep it from being vulnerable. But if you've left your laptop on the lock screen, 9 times out of 10, that Bitcoin or the bit encryption code is going to be bypassed because your laptop is still available, and what was last on screen is still going to be there for someone hacking it. So I just think that mindfulness and that real opportunity is the one that does keep me up at night most times, because I can't control when our properties are going to be targeted and when a theft is going to be successful, but I can try to leverage enough training for the individuals that work for us to make sure they raise that alarm and flag it when it happens.
Yeah, and it sounds like, you know, it's training, but it's also then you have to have the right procedures in place, like physical asset inventories. Like how key are those that many organizations likely don't have a full picture of all of their devices, you know, including portable hard drives and thumb drives, like all the little things that I know Fleetus would have on a checklist. You know, a lot of people are like, well, I've got my phone and my laptop. You're like, great, but what about these 7 other items that could be used, you know, as a way to compromise you or the company, right? So it's great education and awareness. Sid?
So I'd like to talk about the fact that you don't have to actually steal a key fob or steal an access card. I can use a flipper and I can steal that
There it is. There's the emerging threat of physical security.
So
like
I just
a new
have
device.
to go and touch something. Now this is not something new. This is just a convenient device. All those things all already existed. So card skimming is there for your credit card. In the same way, I can steal the RFID or whatever it is off of a fob, and I can just keep them and play them back.
Yeah, I can also know what conference you're at, and I can clone your key to your hotel, and then I can go in and grab your laptop that way.
Yep.
Right.
And in the same way, like you're talking about hotels, a safe in the hotel is absolutely unsafe. It's got a standard. It usually has a standard code that is left there, and it can be.
Yes, if you can call the front desk and say, I have forgot my code, and they can send someone up to reset that code, the safe is no longer a safe. Fleetus?
I could go many different places, so I'm just going to talk with 2 real quick. How many of you are properly vetting those subcontractors who are cleaning, security guards, and paying attention to what they have access to and when they have access? Do you monitor their badge reads if you force them to badge so they have physical keys? Have you looked in your conference room for a Raspberry Pi that's plugged into that TV? Have you looked behind your desktop laptop for a physical keylogger? Do your users even know how to crawl under their desk if they have a desktop underneath their computer, or an all-in-one monitor that's got built in, and know what's supposed to be plugged into it? That's phase one. That's physical security 101 that we don't do. I don't walk into an office and immediately inspect every cable that's plugged into my laptop or desktop that I might have plugged in overnight or checked for it. Or I may or may not have software where that cleaner put a rubber ducky or a USB into my laptop last night and attempted to do something. It may or may not have executed, but can I at least monitor the attempt by the cleaning lady who got paid off to bring in the USB or the rubber ducky or the Raspberry Pi or the flipper that we're talking about to clone? Another thing from a personal point of view, your hotel keys. If you're using that virtual key, friends of mine have done this test. If your room happens to be above, let's say, the gym or the pool, you're going to unlock that door when you unlock your room. Because of it does several meters. So if you're proximately enough, when you unlock your room, you're also unlocking any other publicly spacing facility. Not saying not to use the near field communication virtual keys, but just be aware that it does broadcast, and it's not just a meter, it's several meters. So if you happen to be the room beside the pool, the gym, or maybe even above it, you're likely going to unlock another door, inadvertently allowing someone in and out of those facilities. Just
Yeah, and it opens the opportunity for an interception as well. And so in those public and those common areas, people can definitely intercept those opening codes. And with what Sid's shown us with Flipper and many other tools, I mean, this also goes into the how cars are being stolen, how physical security is crossing this kind of cyber, and tools are getting stronger as technology grows. And so we have to get stronger and smarter and faster than that, and bring our people up to speed, to make sure that they are aware of these emerging threats. So it's like, almost everyone should know what a Flipper Zero is in a sense, because it's not a scary, hacker device, right? It's a common tool that can be used for engineering and productivity and all these things. And yes, it could also be used for maliciousness. But if people can recognize it, know what it is, it's no longer scary, and maybe they see it, maybe they report it. Like if you see, like to Tracy's point, like if they had someone say, "Oh, I saw someone with a device that they shouldn't be, roaming around, the campus," that would be a massive win for kind of a security awareness program, right? Because now you've shown them the attack vector, you've trained them on it, they've identified it, and they've reported it. Like that's what we need to get to, and that's what we need to do in normalizing these kind of conversations. Excellent. Any other kind of comments around?
One last thing,
yeah.
we talked about vetting people who work at your office. We have very strict vetting procedures now for interns and people who are working with us from outside the org. We have had corporate espionage happen with these kinds of people in the past.
Yeah, it's a valid point. Like, it's a maybe to our niceness, like we gotta stop trusting so many people. Like, yeah, we can employ people and give them money, and they can be friendly and stuff, but we have to remember everyone could have an alter ego or motive to be there and to take advantage of the situation that you've given them. So if you're too opening and too welcoming, and here are the keys to the castle, and off you go, here's your Active Directory login, that's a very dangerous situation to be in if you don't have the right procedures in place. Excellent comments as always, everyone. Thank you very much. I'm going to jump into our third and final poll question.
We have a hand raised by Oladell, so I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Do you have a question, Oladell, or if you do, you can either we can allow you to speak, or you can type it in the chat. Let me know which one you'd prefer. As I go and click.
He typed error in the chat. I think he actually.
Oh, it was an error. It was
Okay.
unexpected.
An accidental hand raise. No worries at all. Just thought we'd check. Thank you, Scott, for catching that. So our third poll question today. How are reporting mechanisms handled when it comes to physical and cyber incidents within your organization? So, first off, do you have one? Do you know if you have one? And if you do, is it the same channel, separate channel? How's it split up? And I guess kind of as these poll questions are going, I'd like to ask kind of Tracy, Fleetus, and Sid just to kind of chime in and let us know how these type of incidents would be handled within your organizations and what's in place there. And if it's not like ideal, where do you want to get to?
So
I can chime
I'll
in.
go
No,
quick.
Cletus, you go this time.
Yeah, I'm in a fully remote company now, so I'm dealing with a unique situation. We have colo space. We just moved from one to another and where my HQ is, and it's got a dedicated floor. Well, we broadcast this to our employees. Some of our employees walked into the new colo, got into the common space. That's not a problem. They got curious. They found their way up to the 5th floor of our space. They found the key lock. They started playing with the key lock and eventually figured out how to get past said key lock and get into our space. So this offered a great discussion. I run all of our security for the organization. So the executive admin came to me asking about physical security. So it allowed me to actually sit down and think about, I'm a remote company. We have a physical presence that does a colo a couple days a week, small groups coming in. How do I want to handle that? So first off, I just started to go back to the colo. What is their physical security policies? How were they supposed to verify that these employees were supposed to be going up the elevator? Was there any checks? They ended up leaving the door unlocked when they left. They shut it. They just didn't lock it because they didn't understand the locking mechanism. So our floor was open. So this is the stuff that I've been able to think through this week, fresh on my mind of how do I educate the cyber and the physical when it comes to social engineering. They just tampered. They were just curious. So now I've had to have conversations about, I appreciate your curiosity, but let's not do that because now you're setting precedents or piggybacking an elevator. So I think it's important, as I alluded earlier, to get some kind of logging. So I've asked for a paper log for now until we can get a physical log. Will the colo let me get their logs? Will they ship me a report so I can see badge reads or passcode attempts in and out of that door? Maybe, maybe not. But I can start asking those questions about how do I log that activity? Just like we log our cyber events, we need to log our physical. You know when you enter a data center. You know when you enter a building. You know when you enter a secure floor. Why can't I do that with some kind of log? Either paper, which is administrative to start, then try to make it electronic, but I can audit. That way I can give metrics. We have this much utilization. I've also had this many failed attempts. Was the failed attempts because someone's tired and need their coffee? Or did I have an outsider trying to brute force their way into my physical control? Because there's no camera. Maybe I put a camera. Do I care about a camera? All these questions come into play, but they tie back into the security piece of cyber because that's your IoT devices. These locks are IoTs. They have to talk to some network.
Well, yeah, it's a very valid point. Like as we kind of every year we move forward, more physical security measures become digital, electronic security measures, even though they are still rooted in physicalness. Like, if the power goes out, what happens to our locks?
Yeah, do they fell open or do they
Right?
fell closed?
Exactly, right? What happens to, all the different, controls that we put in place digitally? What happens to the camera system? What happens to the, or the backups? And you have to start to think about those things. And as I mentioned off the top, physical security goes beyond just kind of the immediate threats that we've identified of break and enters and corporate espionage and, just misplaced devices. Those are your common ones. But, physical security also comes down to your IR plans for disaster. And I mean, look at the world we're living in now with wildfires, have changed their patterns, and now more data centers and more head offices and corporate environments are susceptible to destruction than they were 15 years ago. So are we prepared for that? Obviously with global warming, there has to be an entire different conversation about, how you protect your physical assets moving into the next stage. So great points, Cletus.
We haven't talked about biometrics on this call. I'm surprised it hasn't came up yet. Like facial recognition, your thumb, your voice, like those are physical controls that we use to go into places. I have biometrics on my laptop. I lock and unlock and multi-factor with my biometric today.
Yeah, I use biometrics every day for authentication. I just saw that major airlines are now testing out face scanning recognition for to try and speed up the process of ticketing and security and everything. Right? Minority Report, anyone? But we have to start paying attention to these things because we can't let technology get ahead of us because we won't then have the proper controls and checks in place to manage that technology. Perfect. Does anyone else kind of want to just touch on that before we move on to our final talking point?
I'd just jump in a little bit on that technology piece in terms of, readying your personnel and particularly in the security teams to prevent more increasing digital attacks in terms of one of the organizations I work for, there was a meeting in progress. It was a board meeting. It was on the 12th floor of the building, and a drone flew by the outside window. They were really worried about what that might have looked like or what that could have been attempting to do. Fortunately, it was just a real estate video shoot for the building. But it brought to mind at the time for me the propensity now for people to launch drones over
Oh.
corporate and industrial complexes.
Yeah.
Security teams need to be watching for these types of attacks from, you know, above now, and from devices where people are just recording. You know, even something as simple as the Street View car coming up onto your premises and driving through your facility to map your roadways can be another way in which these threat actors identify key points on your campus exterior or your building exterior and create a bit of a view or a vision in terms of what your vulnerabilities are attached to that. So
it's a super valid point.
Yeah.
And a quick interjection though, but did you know that you can actually request Google to blur your entire street view
that's good.
from a personal to a corporate point of view? So if you don't want people to be able to see what your gate looks like and what your pathway up looks like and what your actual entrance looks like, just reach out and do that. I've done it in the past and it's been successful, but it's a very valid point. Street view cars, drones, even people just like taking that real estate video, but not knowing what else they're capturing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And to think about how much open source intelligence, you know, that is out on the internet from drone shots that people are just amazed by.
Yeah.
But if you really pay attention and look, the things that you could probably learn.
Absolutely.
And I mean, a drone is a couple $100 at Best Buy now. Like, it's not like we're talking thousands of dollars for someone to do this, right? Like, prisons are having contraband dropped from drones, right? We can see the new conflicts in the world that are being fought by drones. It's an emerging technology that will kind of affect all of us. Okay, perfect. We are actually, I guess we can. Do you want to review the poll question, Scott, before we jump into our last talking point, just to
Sure.
get that out? Yeah, let's do that then. So Scott's
Make sure I
share
get the right window this time and not share my whole desktop. There we go. So question number one, we had 15 responses. Do you believe that integrating security and physical, this was not number one, but leads to better, oh yeah, this was number one, leads to better overall security outcomes? Yes, so everybody agrees, that's great. Number two, a little more challenging, is have you experienced incidents where cyber and physical incidents intersected? Majority of people said yes, some said no, some said they didn't know. And then let's see, number three is somewhere here. Maybe I didn't launch it yet. Give me a moment. One sec. That's weird. I can't see it. All right. Here we are. Number three. How are reporting mechanisms handled when it comes to physical and cyber incidents in your organization? So most organizations have separate channels. I was actually kind of surprised by this.
Yeah, same here. And then I just saw the comment by Autumn in the chat saying that she said, Fleetus, you mentioned that you're responsible for physical and cyber. Where she works, they have physical and cyber separated into different orgs. So she'd like to know where cyber and physical sit at other companies. So it's a great poll question, just because it opens a conversation where I think a lot of people thought it was just one way or the other. And here we are. So
I'll chime in real quick. The reason I'm physical is because we're a small org. I've been in others where I had to partner with the emergency response planning team. They sat with physical. That was my connection to physical. Is I ran tests with them where I sent desktop alerts, text messages, and phone calls for like, are you safe? Are you okay for natural disasters, active shooters, other exercises? So they use the IT security systems to find the geolocation to make sure I broadcast the right thing. So that was one thing I was going to talk about. Your geolocation is another physical security and cyber security piece. So turning off geolocations when you take a photo and post it, turning off geolocations in the apps that don't need to know your location to operate. They just want your location so that they can market you and sell your data. So
and knowing what exit data exists on on all your files, and being able to scrub that and provide clean versions and different things like that.
It's okay to have geolocation for certain things, and we've talked about in other calls. A VPN will not disable geolocation for 911 or emergency services. you're still going to be geolocated because the emergency services need to be able to find you when your Apple Watch thinks you fell or when your car detects a collision. Like we have smart devices all around us that will automatically page out based on where you're physically sitting, and it'll make a decision on your behalf. And we have to be careful in corporate worlds that our personal devices don't make decisions for corporate. Like it doesn't need to call in 911 if I'm inside a geofenced utility plant. Don't do that. Don't disclose the plant location.
Yeah. Just before Tracy, I'm just going to read John's comment from the chat. One of the largest telcos in the UK, they've just brought physical security team under the cyber one. So mainly because so much of the physical work is reliant on the cyber data, especially with increasingly smart buildings. So there we go. Now we're starting to see the literal collision where they're going to kind of force two entities to be one because there is so much overlap. Tracy?
Yeah, I was just going to add on the location services in terms of the aspects on the security awareness side. Most of my training material will incorporate social media reminders for general employees that just remind them, if you're in a customer facing role, so for example, in the insurance world, when you are engaging with your claims adjuster and you might be unhappy with your interaction, if your Facebook and your Instagram is open and you allow anyone to publicly message you, we've had so many employees that have been attacked on social media on their personal accounts based on customer interactions gone sour, and also individuals who've been threatened, who then you go on their social media as a security professional and you check how vulnerable they are with the OSINT search, and you find home addresses, photos of spouses, children, schools, marinas, places that they frequent, check-ins upon check-ins, and I just get so overwhelmed. And for a physical security professional, this is great when I'm investigating the threat actor themselves, because I can find out all kinds of things about them.
But it's
that
scary that
use
your
then.
employees are that exposed, right? And then you're like, if that's just one.
It's terrible. So yeah, those are the ways in which I think cyber can really help in the sense of providing good data points that can be incorporated in security awareness materials and beef up some of that stuff, and those spear phishing campaigns that are generated from social media too, like LinkedIn profiles. I've seen a number of them in my career where an email from the CEO goes to the correct person in payroll to change their financial payroll deposit account so that they can have their next paycheck transferred to a new account, because woe is me, I've lost that account, I've had to shut it down. And the person has been diligent enough to say, hey, this doesn't seem legit, instead of immediately changing based on the email address. So those are some of the ways in which it can get very dodgy in the intersection between our worlds. And certainly we rely upon each other quite closely on creating material that helps reinforce both sides and the strengths and the value add.
Yeah, and it's a whole other topic. But the social media aspect, because there's a lot of organizations have policies around social media, like, but again, how much can they enforce that? Because that's your personal decision and your personal social media. But when it becomes a business compromise, at what point do you have to say that is responsible? So I mean, like I said, a conversation for another day, but I think a very important one, that we realize that, okay, so if we're not going to be responsible for what can we stop what our employees are doing?
Yeah, and to your point, Ryan, executive protection is really difficult if my executives refuse to privatize their social media accounts and stop advertising where to find them.
Yeah.
I can't protect you if you keep telling everyone where you are.
Yeah, right. And yeah, so whole other conversation. Valid, fantastic points. I'm going to go to Scott, and then I'm going to wrap this section up with Sid briefly, and then we're going to jump into our last question, just being mindful of time today.
Yeah, absolutely. So something I just wanted to highlight that we haven't really talked much about, which is role-based training. So when you think about some industries, there are large groups of the organization that have specific exposure, perhaps. So for example, think about the operational technologies, utilities, and other places where they have a lot of physical control systems in place, and they have to try and keep those control systems separate from the production or office-based systems. And so I think there's a need for, a lot of focus for some organizations to combine the physical and cyber aspects of security for those. And even going more focused, you can think of things like building automation security or building automation controls, where you have but most likely cloud-based management of the building systems, and you need to make sure you've got multi-factor authentication there for sure. But just to have the administrators aware of the risks that could occur because of their access and being responsible. So I just wanted to highlight the role-based aspect of this stuff.
And another thing, just to trigger people, is when you move into, like, let's say you buy a brand new condo, right? Let's just say you went out and bought a brand new condo right now. As a consumer, are you aware of the level of threat that you are potentially at with the level of automation that are built into these buildings now? You know, and not to be scary and gloom and doom and all this, but you can, like, go to YouTube and watch the videos of threat actors and security researchers taking over entire buildings in minutes. That's all the power, that's all the error, that's all the locks, that's all the internet connectivity, that's everything within your building you don't have control of, even though you own that space. And so there's a cross section of physical of kind of hitting us and not being ready. And as you know, so who should be educating people about that, and at what point do we start? And so just another thing that I've thought of as this physical world continues to combine with the cyber world. Okay, I think we should jump into our last question, which we've probably talked much about anyway, but it's an important question. So let me just share my screen so we can all see that together. How can physical security guidance best be incorporated into the cybersecurity awareness training and communications? Right. So I think we've touched on a few of these. Scott just mentioned role-based training. And that brought me back to Tracy. You mentioned Honda in Alliston. I think Honda would be a perfect example of what Scott's talking about. A large technologically advanced corporation that has, like, offices, production, R&D all in one facility. That role-based training would be essential to keeping each of these kind of silos functioning and protected while they're all supporting each other. So what are some of the other thoughts from the panel around how we can incorporate physical controls into our cyber awareness training?
I'll just add on to your piece there. We have to start with the person again. I mean, I've talked about this probably way too much, the human-centric side of just making sure that they understand the basic things. This is the common analogy I use all the time. How do you know when to tie your shoe? How do you know when to enter the front door? How do you know to turn off the stove? Like, there's just things that are learned, alt, or you just get exposed to them and you crash, burn, and you get yourself out of the ditch. You got your identity stolen, so you know not to give away your credit card over the phone anymore. You know not to open the front door because you got burglarized. But at the same time, we also have to encourage our users to be comfortable to open the front door, to tie their shoe, and to leave their house. So we have to do both sides of the coin by ensuring them that we're going to put the proper technical and administrative controls in place, but we also need them to follow procedures, because the procedures is written, but there has to be a procedure. We've already talked about the three-way handshake to make sure a BEC or a deep fake doesn't happen. CEO has to approve, someone else cuts the payment, someone actually pays it. Like, you have three people involved. It's the handshake again. We have to learn to help put policies in place. We already talked about pull the door shut behind you. You don't just let anyone walk in your neighborhood. You don't leave your front door open all day long. Why
Yeah.
would you leave it open at work?
Right. Like, if you went to the grocery store, would you just, like, leave your car door open, assuming someone else is going to close it when they walk by?
Or
Right.
you leave your car running? Do you leave your
Yeah.
car running? Do you leave your
I do leave
computer?
my car running all the time. No.
It's the basic analogies of putting it back in.
Yeah.
I know some companies don't let you talk about home life, but you
Yep.
can still talk about home life without talking about home life.
It's so important, and it's just making those small connections so that it becomes normalized. And as much as Fleetus is going to talk about human centric, I'm going to continue to talk about normalizing security. That it's just going to be a topic we talk about, because people aren't afraid. Like, Tracy, this has got to be up your alley. People are not afraid to talk about fire drills, right? We've been doing them for, I don't know, longer than I've been alive. And they change, they update, but we're not afraid of them, right? They are a part of our system. And the beauty about a fire drill, Tracy, is you can teach your entire team at your organization how to do it, and they take that knowledge home. And then all of a sudden, if they were at a hotel or a conference or a friend's house and the fire alarm went off, they would know what to do. So I always go back to this, and this is what I want with security awareness. I want us to be able to train our people so it's just a normalized event. So when they learn something in the office, they go back home and it becomes a translated thing. So then they make a better decision with social media. They make a better decision here. And then that starts to build a better security culture overall. And that's the only way we're going to get there, because we can't force people to turn off their Facebook. We can't force people to not leave the laptop on the car when they run into the store. We can't force people to not work at the airport when they're, you know, traveling and letting everyone read their screen and intercept their Wi-Fi and who knows what else. So I think it's all about that human kind of centric approach and trying to help people understand the problem.
If I can add to that too, Ryan, I think
Absolutely.
it's about starting with the most critical intersections as well. So it's trying to peel back the layers to what's the most likely potential threat that intersects the two areas of the organization, and then creating good governance around how to respond to that and how to ensure that the people within your organization are prepared to address those, and that you have good robust policies. And I'm usually quite motivated to make sure that CISO has a view of all the policies that intersect with their world and that they cross-reference each other where needed. So the acceptable use policy talks to securing your assets and may go back to, you know, reporting a theft and giving them the incident report data in terms of how to file an incident report. So really creating that rigor in your internal policies and procedures to be able to point each other at each other when the lens becomes the other side. So it shifts from security to cyber side, that it's really clear in the policy. And then with the awareness training, employees do suffer fatigue from constant, you know, awareness materials and training, and you're always trying to tip the hat in favor. In my organization, I'm always trying to tip it in my favor and get more time with individuals. So to your point on the fire safety, yes, I do wear the health and safety hat, the business continuity hat, and the physical security hat in my organization. Can I get drills for fire done? Yes. Can I get active shooter done? No. Why not? Because there's not as much of an appetite, and there's a lot of sensitivity around
Well,
those
so I had a
things.
question about that. Does our sensitivity, and Thea would probably love this question, does our sensitivity as, you know, humans prevent us from learning essential skills that would protect us? And I think you just answered the question when it comes to active shooters. Absolutely. You know, when it comes to natural disasters, when it comes to, you know, other misfortunate events that, again, have hurt us, pandemics. Does anyone remember the pandemic? How did we all fare? Like, we failed, is the answer. So, you know, I think there's a very valid point in that we need to not have sensitivities to things. If something has happened and people have been affected, we need to bring people into the loop about it so they can be prepared to not let it happen to them. I know it would be a hard session to sit through an active shooter drill. Like, I would feel uncomfortable. I would squirm in my seat. I would, you know, maybe remember bad stories from the past, and I would then maybe think, like, you know, I would have a reaction. That is fine. But as long as you have a well-rounded plan to be able to present the information, deal with the reactions, and support your employees, you've made them better employees, you made them better people, and you've given something that I think is invaluable, and that's training and awareness. Because I'm not going to go Google active shooter training on YouTube and sit down and do that. That's outside of my comfort zone.
Which is funny you say that, Ryan, because they do it with children. So I think I saw someone joining us as K through 12 education sector, and we do these drills with small children. So if they have the cognitive capacity
why don't adults
to go through that, adults who are more developed should be more than capable of going through it. And I think, to your point, what's difficult around the adult experience is those battle scars that we all carry as we continue our development journey.
There's the pendulum of sensitivity. And
Totally.
the pendulum of sensitivity swings back and forth depending on real world events and appetite and corporate structure. Then it comes down to geographics. Like, that sensitivity is different everywhere. And one day to the next in Canada, it's different. And so, yeah, I think that's probably, Tracy, what kind of gets in the way, that you can give it to children because you can say, well, they need it because they can't make these decisions for themselves. But when adults are presented with this information, they're like, no, I don't like that. No, thank you. And we have to, again, we have to stop saying so politely.
So Tracy's point, my previous company, our managing director for physical was a former FBI agent. So this was at the top of his list. He included active shooting and others in his physical security training that he sent out to the org. And it was modularized, where the intruders in the building, think about what you're going to do. You're in a room. Do you fight or flight? Do you barricade the door, or do you try to attack the intruder? Like, there was kind of the gamification, without calling it gamification, on what you would do if you were at this place in the building, in this conference room, you were alone or with people. It was a good training. And I went to him and he's like, yeah, this is something we did in the Fed, and I just brought it to the public sector. So it's just like seeing how government stuff can apply.
Can spill over. Yeah. Now, speaking of good training, I'm just going to have to jump in here. We got 3 minutes to the end of the session, but I do have to pay the bills. So you teed me up perfectly, Fleetus. For good training, I mean, ClickArmor is your solution. Not only do we offer interactive gamified training, it's immersive and it's role-based and customized. So if you're thinking about kind of what's your next step for your organization and kind of how to take some of the concepts that we've talked about today and bring them to your team, ClickArmor would be a fantastic way to do that. Feel free to reach out to Scott or myself. We'd love to chat with you about that and more. My last slide that I do want to bring to everyone's attention is what did we feel were today's best insights. I just love to have the last couple minutes around the table with our four panelists today, and to hear what were some of the key insights that maybe you can take back to the executive team. What are some of the key insights for the implementators? So the people like Tracy and the others that are responsible for everyone's security, and for the individuals, what can we take home and maybe pass on to your significant other, your spouse, your neighbor, and to try and, again, let's bring awareness to everyone. So I'll be quiet and I'll let the panel finish things up.
Yeah, Ryan, I just wanted to let people know it's nice when you're hosting these things, because now I can sort of listen and make notes, and it's just amazing how much insight there really is in these sessions, because everything on all levels was covered, and every panelist contributed great. I think Sid's input on things like corporate espionage and shared devices, and how things are actually done physically within his organization are really, I think, useful for the CISO, as well as the idea of the flipper and all these types of threats that Fleetus mentioned. Thea also mentioned things about cultural norms and the need for things to be addressed. Tracy had some great thoughts for managers about how to report stuff, how to do the physical audits, or that it's important to do the physical auditing, and keeping things out of sight, to reduce the temptation and exposure. And then on the personal side, I can't remember who, but somebody mentioned, the visibility of the gym or the pool, or the actual, not the visibility, but the being near, as Fleetus was mentioning that, with your hotel room key. That's a great personal point. If you're around in the hotel, you realize that your room key might be unlocking other public places. So keep out for those people. But just so many insights. Thanks very much, everybody.
Yeah, and another great insight from Scott. I mean, everything Scott contributes. Check the chat, guys. Book recommendations and a lot of comments and everything in there. Our chat is absolutely full of great comments. I just want to say thank you to everyone who's participated in there. Thank you to Thea for being kind of a panelist within chat today. She's not feeling well, so she wasn't up on the video, but she did a great job supporting that way. Tracy, what are your insights and takeaways from today?
I think for me, the biggest thing is that you're not alone and you're not in a silo. So I think Thea said it earlier in terms of the siloed and the interconnectivity. You can sometimes forget and get bogged down in your role and feel like you are tackling this journey all alone, but it is, every organization has these dynamic problems that they're trying to solve. So if you keep your network and you have discussions like this, that's the best insight I can say I've gained from today, that we're not alone. My risks are not unique risks. My intersections are not unique intersections, and other people who are doing the same thing that I am or sitting across the table from me in the cyber roles, we all have insights to share and ways to stitch together our programs to make everybody better.
Awesome. Thank you. Sid?
I'd like it's really made me think about how ad hoc our physical security is. We have building locks and these kinds of things in place, alarm systems, and we forget about them. They're not integrated, tied in with our cybersecurity. I think what I will definitely do after this meeting is bring all this up and somehow make a cohesive plan.
Awesome.
Awesome. And Fleetus, I'll give you the last word. What do you got for me?
As I said, just keep it simple. I think we
Keep it
overcomplicate this stuff. I think we just need to remind people, let's just keep it simple. Ask questions, be curious, but also be dependable. I mean, just keep it simple.
I appreciate that. That is a good way to end our 39th session. And just to let you guys know, 2 weeks from now, March 20th, will be session number 40, the big 40. How much automation is appropriate for your security awareness program? So with all the new automation out there, AI and the rest of it. We're going to talk about the cross sections of that, how to use automation for good, where it could go wrong. And again, we'd love to join you, have you join us. So QR code there to register. Another reminder about the members forum you can join, members at cybersecurityawarenessforum.com. And thank you so much for your time and for your extra minutes today. It was a pleasure having you all, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.